All right, we're back. It's COMP305, Game Programming 1, and it's week 2, lesson 2, part 4 of our series. And what we're talking about here is we just finished talking about Unity. We did a little PowerPoint presentation. Again, it's part of our PDF that's on eCentennial. Right here it is. And in our PDF, I kind of went over things about the Unity lifecycle as well as the event lifecycle for physics and the input. Let's think about this for a second. I'll leave it up because we're going to get to it. All right. So here I am back in Unity. Let's get back into Unity and look at my scene. I've got this black, square right here, and my black square, right, has no other properties to it. Let's add in for my player. Let's add in a material component, and the way to do that, of course, the easier way for me is go to Materials, right-click, Create Material. Right? Let me just do that here. Here's my material. And by default, I want to call this material green because I'm going to take that whole green idea for the player. Here's my green player, right? I need to change my albedo. That's one of the properties here of my material to make it so it's green, right? So I can, whatever I want. I'll choose a green that I like. There we go. All right, cool. There's my green. Now it hasn't been applied to my player. And here on the right-hand side is a good example of what the material would look like. And again, remember what a material is. It gives us some properties on how it reflects light and how it responds to shading and shadows and all that kind of stuff. Okay, we can add additional functionality here. If I click this metallic thing here, if I change the metallic value up, it becomes more of a metallic looking shape, right? More reflective in the metallic zone, right? A little bit different. I can also change the smoothness and add a normal map, and normal maps, height maps, and stuff like that. They add in this, idea or feeling of texture. It gives you almost like geometry to the object, right? And it's a great way of adding in more detail without actually making the object more complex. Okay, it's just a technique that we use. All right, because you can make a very complex object and give it ridges and everything else, but the more complex object you're using, the higher number of polygons you're going to need and more CPU utilization. So it's going to make it something that is definitely more difficult to work with from a game perspective. Different options for rendering modes. One is opaque, then there's a cutout, there's a fade, there's also transparent. We're going to leave it at opaque. The shader, if you notice here, there's a standard shader, standard specular setup, right? If I choose this as an example, it gives me some other examples. Here's specular. See, now specularity is something we saw inside of our Blender example we did, right? Specularity is reflectivity. I can change this, right? So I can increase or decrease the specularity or take it away altogether, and it replaces our metallic default that we have here as a standard, a shader, right? And we can choose other shaders as well, a UI shader, an effect shader, a mobile shader, and if we're going to make mobile objects, we want to use mobile shaders, right? Because it makes more sense. Particles, skybox, sprites, and so on. There's all kinds, right? For now, let's just leave it as a standard shader and leave it as is, just for our example today. Okay. All right. Well, we've created our material, but it's not part of our player, right? Here's something. If I want my player object to stand out, right? So be active. But every time I click on my material, it loses focus. How do I keep my player active without moving away? Well, there's a little anchor, or if you will, a lock on the top right corner of the screen here. If you click onto it, it locks my player inspector on. So even if I click my green material, it's still there, right? This is good. So it kind of combines I can kind of activate my material but still see my inspector on the side. Sometimes that's important to do. Here's what I want to do. I want to grab my material and drag and drop it into my scene to make this green. Now, does this look green here still? It's the same problem, right? No light, no color, right? So we need to add a light at some point. But now our green material, if you notice, is part of my player object. It has a green material with a standard shader. If I expand this, right, I can see the same kind of things I saw earlier when I was creating my material. Okay, you should have this as well. Let's take the little lock off, so that way now I can click on my material if I want or something else, and I can see that, right? go back to my player. In my hierarchy, I want to click away from my player for a second. If I click on my player and add something now, it'll be added as a child. I don't want that. I want to click away. I want to right click and I want to add in a light. Okay, let's add in a point light. Okay, there's different kinds of lights. A point light. Okay, cool. This is my point light. Hey, take a look. Is this point light in the right position? It's 0.0957, 0.06, blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense to you? Doesn't make any sense to me. I want to reset it. So I'm going to go to its transform and reset this light right now to 0, 0, 0. Now, if you notice, it centers itself in the screen. Still no light. How come? Well, let's take a look from a 3D perspective and see what we're seeing. So here's my 3D view. I'm going to pan it. I'm going to scroll out here, right? And if you notice, there's a sphere of light, right, that this thing casts. Well, look where my camera is, right? Where is my light source? Here's my point light. I want to focus in on there, right? Where is my light source happening from a 3D perspective? It's inside the cube. So I got to move it around, right? How do I do that? I can click this one, the W key for moving, and I get my control arms. Now, here's something you can try. If you take if we're going to affect the Z property here, right? The Z property. If I take the blue arrow, I can drag it forward or back. Oh, what's happening here? How come I see it here, but not over here, right? Well, one is behind the object, behind the camera, so the camera can't see the light and the shadows. It's there, but the camera can't detect the light and shadow. And if I put it this way, I actually see the light and shadow because the light is fairly close to the object. Now remember, the color of the object and the brightness that I'm seeing in the green depends on a couple factors. How strong my light source is. And right now, if you look on the right-hand side, right, my intensity is 1, right? That's one thing to note. The other thing is that's one. The other thing is the distance away from my object. So if I'm farther away, just like it would normally be in real life, right, then my light is dimmer. Like, you know, example, the light that comes from the stars, they're shining on us. That light is shining on us too, but it's so far away, we see them as these little pinpricks in the sky, and only in the night sky. Our sun, which is much closer, right, blots out all the light from the other sky, or from space, right? And not only that, but because of the atmosphere and the refraction and so on, but it's so much more powerful than everything else, you can't see the other lights, you can't detect them, right? Well, but they're still there, right? So the same thing goes here. The farther out this light source is, I'm just going to pull it out, or the closer, the more intense color that I'm seeing here of green, right? Now, that's the one way you can do it, by pulling the arrow. The other way is to physically go here in the inspector on the transform and change the Z property to -3. And so all of us have the same property now. Everything else should remain 0, 0, 0, -3. Now I'm seeing some light, all right? Let's change the intensity from a 1 to a 2. So we see our little cube here, our square, that's, you know, fairly brightly lit, right? And I'm going to go back to a 2D view so you can see what it looks like. This is what it looks like from a 2D view. Looks like a square with a lamp in front of it. If I click on the player, right, the lamp is still there, but the player is active. If I don't want to see the lamp in my view, what can I do? I can, for now, if I want to work with it, I can disable my lamp. I can see this little checkbox here next to the point light. I can check it, and now it's disappeared. But what that does is it physically removes it from the scene, so I don't have any light, right? Anything that is disabled in my scene does not appear in my scene, even though physically it's there. And it can't interact with anything in the scene as well. Sometimes you want to be able to turn things off, especially if they're all tagged in the same layer. Like example, all the walls. I want to take all the walls down in my three-dimensional scene because I want to see the floor. I'm working on the floor right now, right? I want to turn the walls off for a second. All right, this is a good technique. All right, and they're all grouped inside of the walls game object, empty object, that all the other walls, right walls, you know, the north wall, the south wall, the east wall, and the west wall, they're all part of a wall group. I'm making this up here, right? And the wall game object, right, I can turn it off to turn off all the walls, right? So I don't see them right now. Okay, let's leave this light on for a second. We can leave it on. And if you notice also, there's a nice little check mark next to the light. Take a look. If I click the light off, right, it also turns off, right? So it actually turns off the effect of the light. I don't want that. I'll turn it back on. These are just ways of turning it on and off, just to notice that these things exist. Okay, I can minimize these things, and I don't have to look at the light anymore. It's just a point light that's in my scene. Okay, cool. Let's do something else. If you notice, I did that all in play mode. Take a look. Hey, this is all in play mode. I did all that stuff, right? Does my player have my material? No. I did all that in play mode, but then I was able to affect my scene and check it out. Well, what this does is it allows me to play with my game, modify attributes, and put them back, right? Like reset everything so I can test what my game would look like in certain different things without affecting my actual game. It's the actual game itself. This is a great way of testing your game in real time, right? Let's do this all again. So I've got my green material. I'm going to drag and drop it onto my my player now in real time. And now I need to add that light in for people who didn't get that, right? That's why I'm doing this again. Right click, away from the player. Right click, add a light, add a point light, right? I'm going to reset the location to -3 so I get a little bit of light, right? And I'm going to change the intensity of the light to 2, just so that way it's a little brighter than what we had before. That's what I did. Okay, so now my light is there. Here's my player. Cool, cool. I want to move my player around now. That's the next step, right? And I can do that by accessing my player controller script, which I have here in my scripts folder. So double click on this. Now, if you have Visual Studio might pop up. If you have MonoDevelop like I do, MonoDevelop will pop up. You can also pop it up in something else. And as someone mentioned earlier, you can decide which editor you use for scripting. Okay, so here's my start method. I'm going to leave this on for now, right? So where would I want to make it so that I can move around my object? Where? Which method do I need to use? Is it the fixed update method that I want to physically move from X and Y A to X and Y B? Or is it the update method? Is this the right method I need? Anybody have an idea? Come on, guys. I just talked about this in the PowerPoint presentation. If I just want to move the actual object, not use physics, which update do I use? Update, this one, right? If I wanted to use physics, like push an object around, I'm going to use fixed update, right? So now this is the right update to use. Okay, I want to use my input manager to update this thing, to move it around. How can I do it? Well, I can detect if I have an input value, right? Okay, this is good. Let's try this out. So I'm going to say if, hey, this is a conditional statement here. You guys know how to do this, right? If input, let's type input dot get access, right? Get access, and then I'm going to say something like horizontal. Make sure I spell it right. Hey, question for those people using Visual Studio. Does Visual Studio give you code hinting for horizontal and vertical? No, right? Even in Visual Studio, it doesn't do that, right? Okay, so input.getAccess, let's say, and I want you to think about this. Let's put it like this. Let's see what happens. And I want to do something like, I want to make an error happen, right? So that's why I'm doing this, right? And I'm going to put in here something like debug .log. This is going to be an error, right? Movement, right? Some movement, right? Let's see what happens here in Visual Studio. When I go back to Visual Studio, it says, man, look, there's an error back down here right away, right? In my console, if I click my console, there's an error that says, hey, asset scripts player controller, right? And it says 1317. What does that mean? Let's go back to MonoDevelop. 1317. Oh, from line 13 to line 17, somewhere in there, right? It doesn't know where. There's an error, right? What is the error? It says cannot implicitly convert type float to type bool. Hold on. That means that what getAccess is returning is a floating point value, right? A floating point number. Okay, I want to know what that floating point number is. If I don't know what's happening, I need to know what the floating point number is. Let's do this. So I'm going to go back into MonoDevelop here, and instead of using this if statement, I'll get rid of this debug.log for a second and change this. Let's get rid of this code block, in fact. I want to change this into a debug.log, right? So I may have messed something up, but I want to go debug.log, right? And I want to debug.log my input.getAccess horizontal and see what kind of value I'm going to get, right? So what am I doing? I'm taking the output from this input.getAccess method while I'm passing in the horizontal enumeration, right? And if I hover over it, look what it says, right? It gives me some information about IEnumerable, right? It's an enumeration, right? It's a CO class. Let's run this thing now and see what I get, right? So I'm going to go back to Unity and Is the error still there? Well, hold on. Did I save it in MonoDevelop? There it is. It's saved now. Go back to Unity and then see if I can run it. See if I get an error. Oh, compiler errors have to be fixed. It says, what's this? It says, Unity engine debug does not contain a definition for log. Oh, I may have typed something different. Hold on a second. Oh, man. What am I doing? These finger tapping errors I'm making. Why don't I use code hinting, right? Let's go back. Unity. Right? It's gone. It says all compiler errors have to be fixed before you play. I think it is fixed, so let's play. Okay, hey, look what's happening here. I'm getting a 0. How come I'm getting zeros? I'm not touching anything, guys. Well, my update function's running, but where am I getting the 0 from? What am I doing? What's giving me the 0? I'm not pressing a button. It's 0 because I made horizontal means right or left arrow. So let's go right. Whoa, I get to a 1. Whoa, that's pretty fast too. I gotta be careful of that. It means it's, if I just hold it down a second, I'm getting some values. So it's very sensitive, right? How about left? Left arrow, oh, minus. Hey, there it is. If my horizontal value is positive, I'm moving to the right. If it's negative, I'm moving to the left. It's very simple, right? Let's try this out and let's stop this thing. Okay, very, very simple. All right, cool. That means in my script then, I wasn't asking the right question. It's not if input get axis horizontal. It's change this. If input get axis horizontal is greater than 0, right? If it's greater than 0, that means I'm moving to the right. And let's try this out by putting something like another debug.log. Debug.log. We've not done a cert. Debug.log. Move right. And we'll copy the same thing here, right? Copy the whole script and paste it below. We'll make it a negative, a less than sign, right? And we'll make it move left, right? So there it is. So we've getting some left movement or right movement, right? And I'm going to run this thing now. I'll give you a second to see it. Okay, go back and run this thing. And now in my console, here's my console. I got nothing, right? But if I press the right arrow, oh, wait a minute. What's going on here? Oh, there it is. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. So it's a bunch of rights and a bunch of lefts. That means my input.getAccess method is very, very sensitive. I got to be very careful what speed, what kind of, what multiplier I use to move my stuff around. Okay. Okay, this is cool. I've got the rudiments of movement. I understand the values. Now I can affect movement, right? I hope so. Let's take a look. Okay, so here's my controller. I know that my code has to go in here for moving myself right. Let's just move myself right first. So what do I want to do? Well, I need to make a reference or change the component that's inside of my object, right? And I need to start by referencing my object. Well, I know that every object that I attach a script to is called a game object. So let's start there. So it's game object. Do I use the capital G or the lowercase g in this case? Come on, guys in the back. You guys are too quiet. I'm going to start picking people, right? What do I use? The lowercase, it's 50% chance here, right? It's like Russian roulette. Either you shoot yourself in the head or you don't, right? Tell me. Lowercase g or capital G, right? What is it going to be? Justin, tell me. Lowercase. Yeah, you won. All right, so you didn't die. All right, the bullet didn't hit your head. All right, so lowercase game object dot. Here we go. Get component, which is what we're talking about here. So I'm going to start typing get component with a capital G, right? I can select that. And then in these angle brackets, the type, remember we talked about this, the type is what component am I affecting? Let's go back to Unity if I don't remember. Here's my player, and I'm using the transform component with a capital T. Here's the capital T transform, right? So let's put that in my script, right? So transform, right? I can spell properly. Here's my there's two. There's P and the C. I want the capital in this case, right? And then some parentheses, right? So I'm accessing the game component, and then dot what? The position of my component is going to move, and it's got to equal something. I can't directly affect it. If I try and do this, right? This will kick out an error. Let's take a look at the error it gives me. going back to Unity. Oh, here it is. Cannot modify value type return value of Unity engine transform position. Consider storing the value in a temporary variable. Now, when you see this the first time, you're like, what are they talking about? Because you can't affect it directly. That's what it means, right? You need to create some kind of variable that affects these things. Well, if we're going to make a variable, we might as well make it public so it can appear in our inspector here. Remember, public variables can appear in the inspector to give us a little bit of play when it comes to play testing to make sure that it's correct. Let's do that. So let's add in a public variable here, okay? And it's got to be of type vector2 or vector3. I'm in a 2D game world. What's probably okay to use? Vector2, 2D game, right? All right, so let's do that. So I'm going to do that here at the top of my code. These are my instance variables here in my player controller script, right? So I'm going to say something like public, right? Vector, there's 2, 3, and 4. Hold on, I'm not going to use 4 ever, right? Because that's like time travel, isn't it? Like fourth dimension stuff? No, it's not, but you'll see what it is, right? Let's go to vector2, right? Public vector2, and I'm going to name this thing, maybe we'll call this thing move, right? If I just leave it there and I save, do I see, is that enough? No, I haven't instantiated anything. I've just created a reference to the vector2 class, right? I need to instantiate. There's a couple of ways I can do that. I can do it in start. I can instantiate it here, right? So when it starts, it initializes. I can do it here. I can do it up here, which is bad form. Let's just do it up here for now so you can see it being done. So I'm going to say equals to new vector2, right? And then if I open the brackets, I have a couple of signatures. One of them is an x and y value, and they're both float types, just for your reference. Let's make them 0.0.f, 0.0.f. Now I can also assign default values. For now, let's leave it at 0, 0. We'll modify this value later on. Okay. Okay, cool. So I've got this move vector. Well, that's good. That means I can go like this. I can put this in here. Move. Right? Because it's here. Right? It's public. The other thing, if I really want to be a stickler, is do something like this. This dot move. Right? Because this refers to the instance variable that belongs to the class. Here's my instance variables for those people who are sticklers. Right? Instance variables. These are public instance variables, if you want to really know the truth, right? Which is kind of weird because we want to make private instance variables typically in C# and public properties, right? That's our typical way of doing things from a best behavior perspective, right? But that's okay to put this in. There is no constructor here in this class. That's weird, right? So we got this, again, we got our vector2, our move, right? And we're making this thing move down here. Okay, that's cool. Let's save our script and see what we get here in our Unity now. Okay, so here's Unity. Click away from my player and click back. And, where's my, hold on a second. What's going on here? How come this, what script am I, what error am I getting here? I'm getting a, cannot modify a value type, return type of value Unity engine position. Consider storing the value in a temporary variable. What? I did, right? What? How come it's not working for me, right? I did it right, right? I actually created a vector2 that's in my move, and what I'm doing is I'm saying this dot x. I can't do this dot x is equal to move. I got to change this to position. So my position has two values, x and y. I can't just affect one. I have to affect both, right? So that's the one thing I need to do. I need to change that to position, right? And again, I'm using, if you notice, if I hover over, it says get set. There's positions I can set my, I can use a getter and setter to set my position. Okay, which is what I'm really doing. Let's go back to my Unity. Do I still have an error? Hey, I don't have an error anymore. And guess what happens over here? On the right, my player controller has two new values, a move x and a move y, because it's a vector2, right? Automatically kind of adds into my inspector. Let's add a value of 1 to my move, okay? This is cool. I'm adding a value of 1, right? And going back to my player, I can see it's still there. I'm going to save my scene and fire up my game and see what happens, right? Now I'm going to press I'm going to kind of focus on my game and press my right arrow. I'll press it again. Hey, what's going on? How come it's not moving anymore, guys? Oh, man. Forgive me, it's your fault, man. I blame somebody, right? What's going on, right? Well, no, it's no one's fault. The reason why it's not moving to the right is because I'm not telling it to move continuously to the right. I'm telling it to move to position 1. That's what I'm doing here. This is wrong, right? I'm not trying to move it to position 1, right? I want to move it to the new position. And my new position is going to be based on the old position. I'm going to add 1 to the old position. How do I do that? Well, I need another variable. And my variable, in this particular case, can be something private if I like to, right? So let's make some private instance variables as well, really quickly. And here's private vector 2. We'll make it a vector 2. And we're going to call this private vector 2 new position, right? And we're going to make it a new vector 2 right here on the top, which is of 0.0f and 0.0f, just like we did before. But it's not going to be exposed to Unity, to the inspector. Who cares? It's just for us. Now down here in my update function, I can assign it initially to my game object position. And how do I do that? I can say something like this, right? New position then, right, is equal to game object dot get component, right? Of course, we're accessing the transform value of the get component, and that's something we can probably have done differently. We'll do that next time. Position, the current position, plus, right, plus this dot move, right? How about if we do that? If we try to do this, we say this, sorry, new position is equal to this, right? Can I do that? Game object dot get component transform dot position. Did I do something wrong? Huh? Oh, right. So that's my new position, right? And what I want to do to it is I want to plus equals. So I want to add that in plus my move, right? I want to add this position, my new position is there, plus move. I want to add the vectors together, vector addition. So this dot move, might be able to do that, right? Add 2 vectors together. And then I don't want to put this dot move down here. I want to put new position, right? If this works well, then what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, I want to save my position from before. Here's my position, my current position, right? And I want to add the move value, which is 1, and the x-axis to my new position. And then I want to take this new position and assign it to my current position. That's all I'm doing. Okay, let's see if that works. Or if I get an error. Okay, run it. Hey, there's some compiler errors. What's that mean? It says the call is ambiguous between the following methods or properties. Unity vector 2 operator plus, right? And Unity vector operator vector 3. What does that mean? Maybe I can't do it that way, right? Right? Because I'm trying to add my position, right? New position, which is my new position, right? I have to make it add on to this move somehow, right? I got to add my move on to this position, right? How do I do that, right? So I'm kind of remarking on my old position. This is my old position, really, my new position, plus my move variable, right? So do I have to do it in two ways? Can I do this? So here's my position, which is a vector, right? And then I can do something like this. I can say something like another line, new position plus equals to move. And that can work. What am I doing here, right? Anyone else have another recommendation, by the way? Okay, that looks like it's going to work. Let's see. I press the arrow key. Whoa! That's too fast, eh? That's way too fast. So that means I got to reduce this move to 0.1. That's what I recommend, right? We're almost at the end here, guys. Bear with me while we're finishing. And if I run it again, now it's much smoother. Okay, cool. So 0.1 seems to be the right amount. Going back to my script. All I've done is broken this out into 2 things. It was confused what I was trying to do here. I'm just broken this out into new position is equal to, I'm capturing the current position, right? And then I'm adding the move value, add move value to current position to get the new position, right? And then I'm taking the new position and changing my actual component to the new position. by using a vector. Okay, this is good. That means if I add it, right? If I add this to the move, this is good, right? But I don't want to always add it, right? I don't want to do this here, right? I want to do this in here, right? I want to say my new position then is this, right? Add this to the move if I'm going to the right, right? And then if I'm going to the left, I'm going to copy this, subtract it from the movement, the position when I'm moving to the left, right? Subtract. I'm going to move the other way, right? Okay, this looks very much alike. And when we have things that look very much alike, there's a good case here to create its own method. But we won't do that today because of time, right? Let's go back to Unity and see what happens. So I'm going to kind of press play. And if I've done everything correctly, I should be able to move my stuff right and left now, nice and smooth. Take a look. And across the light, as I approach the light, it gets brighter and duller, right? So maybe not the right light source. And what about if I want to move it up and down, just to finish off this example with the 1 minute that we have remaining? What do I do? Well, it's really simple after this, right? I'm going to take this whole script here, right? Copy, go back, paste, right? Here it is. Get rid of some of these extra free lines here so we can scrunch it up. And change horizontal to vertical, right? Right, that's one thing we want to do. And hey, I'm changing my position, right? How do I change that? That's really weird. Well, what I could do, right, is I could say my new position.x now is equal to this move.x plus equal. I can specify, right? And this .x is minus equal to this move.x because move is actually a vector. And now this would be y, right? So new position.y really quickly is equal to this move.y. And the same thing goes with subtraction. This .y is equal to this move.y. So that's part of it from a moving perspective up and down, right? And I'm adding or subtracting my move value. But guess what? My move value we've only kind of put it in here on Unity. Here's my player. My move value only shows 0.1 on the x-axis. I need to add the same value on the y-axis, 0.1. It's kind of a waste, but let's put it in there for now. So 0.1, 0.1. And now that I have this, I have a valid value for both the x and y axes. Make sense? Let's run it, see what happens. So I'm going to run this thing. And now when I click onto this, I can move up, down, diagonal, across, the whole thing. I have my complete movement. Still pretty fast, and it kind of floats, if you notice. There's still quite a bit of, when I touch it and let go, there's still quite a bit of movement. I may even want to go even slower than this, depending on the kind of game I'm building, right? But this is an example of moving a primitive around a scene. And if I look at this from a 3D perspective, right, while I'm in gameplay, I can do that too. I can kind of see what's going on. So here I am with my movement. I can see what it's physically doing here on my scene. Take a look in 3D. It's actually just moving it around in two-dimensional space. It has nothing to do with my Z value whatsoever, just moving it around on the same plane, right? That's what's going on. Any questions before we depart for the day or for the week? So again, just as a recap while we finish off. So today we talked about the Unity event lifecycle, right? We did this Unity event lifecycle. This is, by the way, brute force code. There's much more efficient ways of doing this, right? But I'm putting it up there so you can see what to do. Worst case scenario, if you don't know what to do, right? Worst case scenario, we do it like this. And let me just, it's not the whole code, by the way. There's some stuff missing on the top. If you noticed, I did add some, my vector 2, if you haven't done this already, my vector 2 move. And also add this vector 2 new position. Right, I added two vectors. One is a public, one's private. Okay, so let's go back down here. So if you think about this, we've talked about the Unity event lifecycle. We've talked about the physics events. We talked about on trigger enter, on collision enter. We've also talked about the input manager and the input class, which is what we're doing right here. And we've affected a three-dimensional object in two-dimensional space, right? So that we can see movement with input values, right? This is our first entry into the world of scripting for Unity. And we're going to continue this next week with a tutorial we're going to start called Mail Pilot. We're going to make a new Mail Pilot game, a whole new top-down scrolling game together, right? I'm going to demo it starting next week. And it's really, really important you attend the classes and watch the videos so that it'll help you with assignment number 1 to understand what we're doing in assignment number 1. Okay? Any other questions for this? Guys, enjoy the week. See you next week on Monday. Take care. Oops, I probably want to go here.